Hey, what's good, folks? Thanks for tuning in. I'm Lil Guillotine, and welcome to the Chopping Block.
Guillotine and your neck meets beautifully.
The Chopping Block. Today we're going to be doing some analysis of the lyrics of one of my songs. The song is called Gun Control is Racist, which I think is especially poignant and relevant right now as we're dealing with the death of Ahmaud Arbery by his armed white supremacist killers, the ex-cop and the ex-district attorney. Yeah, let's get into it. First of all, let's take a listen to the song.
Let's go!
Hey, gun control is racist. Gun control is racist, yeah. Hey, gun control is racist. Gun control is racist, yeah. Gun control is racist, your system complicit in violence, now face it. Right now let me list it.
There I'm referring to the fact that the system of white supremacist patriarchal capitalism that we live in currently is not peaceful at all, but rather it operates off of violence, perpetual violence in many different ways. First of all, the violence on black bodies that the police conduct and that other armed white supremacists have the green light from the state to go ahead with. And of course there's violence on working class people of all sorts. The state needs to be able to control movements, make sure that the workers don't organize together and overthrow it. There's the violence of the colonizing, imperialist military forces of the United States and many other countries. So like I often say, you can't really call yourself a pacifist or non-violent if you actually call the police on people, because the police, when they arrive on the scene to deal with problems, there's always an element of violence and coercive force to everything that they do in society. They go and they solve problems by talking to folks sometimes. It's always understood that if you don't listen to the police, they will do violence on you in order to commit self-defense because they get scared so easily, especially when it's a black male young person, or to put you in jail if you don't listen to their orders. So when you call the police, there's always the understanding or the underlying concept of state-condoned violence that's going to be used. Also, if you vote for, Democrats, for instance, or Republicans, obviously, then you're voting for politicians who constantly enforce the will of the capitalist status quo on colonized peoples across the globe via coercive military force, oftentimes resulting in mass death of folks who are babies and infants and children, and of course all types of people. And so if you're someone who votes for either of the two parties, then basically you're complicit in imperialist violence, which is actually quite atrocious if you think about it. So that's what I meant by those lyrics. And then it goes,
White men sow division, anti-black enlisting, make places you live in an open air prison. The white man, mass killer, race murders but still there, banning guns like Hitler. What the fuck's the deal, dear?
So yeah, white men sow division is just referring to, I'm critiquing whiteness there. With the whiteness, I'm not necessarily talking about people are bad because of the color of their skin. If you have white skin, that doesn't make you bad. But if you are tied up and invested in this concept of whiteness, that's a whole different thing, right? That's different than the color of your skin. Whiteness is a social construct. And so white men sow division is talking about like white supremacists and how they're enforcing racism against black folks, simply by embracing their whiteness, and also, everyday folks, by embracing whiteness, you're actually enforcing racism against black people. Anti-black enlisting, make places you live in an open-air prison. So that has to do with white supremacist recruiting people who are actively anti-black, who have anti-black racism. Make places you live in an open-air prison is a reference to all of the mass shootings that happen in the United States by hetero, white, cis, male, white supremacists. It's almost always committed by them. The white man, mass killer, was the next lyric, which is also another reference to that. Race murders, but still there, banning guns like Hitler. They were referencing racist shooters who shot up Walmart to kill immigrants and other racially motivated white supremacists, mass murderers and mass murders that happen in the United States on a regular basis. Banning guns like Hitler is a reference to that was one of the ways that Hitler and the Nazi Party were able to gain control, is because they banned guns for anybody in their occupied territories in Germany, and that basically made it very impossible for the resistance to happen, for folks to stand up against their violent terrorism. It behooves the state to ban guns as well as racists.
There is an elephant in the room, banning the implement, but you let Nazis bloom. Why is it that you prioritize racist policies? Open your eyes.
That's a reference to whenever there's Nazis who do murders or white supremacists who are killing and they have these manifestos and they're obviously on some racist shit. The response from the liberals is that we need to ban guns, when really we don't need to ban guns necessarily, for the reasons I've said and for reasons I'll get into. But what we do need to ban is Nazis. How come they never focus on banning Nazis or white supremacists? There's a reason behind that, right? Because white supremacy serves the racist status quo, so they need that to exist in society, right?
Gun control is one of the oldest forms of race control, and you please study more. From revocations to bans for all felons, gun controllers are the villain of villains.
I'm talking about how historically gun control was created to protect the legacy of racism in the United States during the Reconstruction period after the Civil War. It behooved the racist status quo and the racist state and ex-slaveholders and the Jim Crow of the time to make sure that ex-slaves, black people, were not able to possess guns because they would fight back against the terrorism, the lynchings that would happen. It was a lot easier to do that if black folks did not possess guns. And I also reference from revocations to bans for our felons. To this day, we see in the bail fund, we see many people who are arrested for being black and possessing a weapon, and not necessarily because they've committed any acts of violence, but rather just because they had a weapon. If you're deemed a felon by the state, you're not allowed to have any weapons. And so we see that this is a big reason why they're able to keep a lot of black folks locked up in jails and prisons, is because of this gun control to this day. Then I say gun controllers are the vanilla villains. A reference there to how the centrists deemed to be rational people who are in control of society, the state, the government, but yet their gun control measures are a huge tool in the toolbox of white supremacist patriarchal capitalism, because like I described before, they use it to lock up black folks indiscriminately. We all know that laws are disproportionately, in this criminal justice system in this country, disproportionately applied to black folks compared to white folks. Certainly where I'm from, almost certainly where you're from as well. Then I go,
Hey, gun control is racist. Gun control is racist, yeah. Hey, gun control is racist. Gun control is racist, yeah. Focus on one time and Nazis too. Take away their rights, that's what you gotta do. Stripping rights is wrong with anyway.
just another reference there to why is it that the liberals and the centrists and the status quo upholders, they always would like to have gun control for folks on the streets and for working class people and black people, but yet they never mention gun control for police, because we know that policing doesn't actually do anything to decrease crime or decrease violence in society, and in fact there's evidence that it does just the opposite. We know that police across the United States murder thousands of people every year, and that if we were to take away their guns, you'd be able to stop all those murders. If you are going to propose taking away people's rights, which you probably shouldn't be doing because that just gives the state more power, then you should also be proposing to take away the police's rights to own guns, because they use them for nefarious purposes constantly, despite the heroic images that are conjured up by blue propaganda, which are all fallacies, in order for folks to be able to accept the ruling class status quo violent nature of the police so that they can keep order how they want to. And then also Nazis too, right? Take Nazis' rights away, not necessarily everybody's. Why is there no gun control for Nazis? And again, just pointing out the discrepancies in the liberals' demands for the state to take away people's rights I don't advocate the state taking away any people's rights personally, but if I did, I would definitely advocate them taking the cops and the Nazis' rights away first.
Take the guns, give them all to the state.
Take the guns, give them all to the state. This is the point I was mentioning before about Hitler. When the state takes away the guns and then they become the people who have sole monopoly on the use of violence and the means of violence, then that creates a situation where they have the power to do anything they want to and enforce the status quo, perpetuate their oppression and their violence, their transphobia, their racism, their xenophobia, their Islamophobia, their homophobia, and all of their bullshit through violent means, which they need. They need those oppressions in order to be able to continue to operate and divide working class folks and divide people among races. Otherwise, they would cease to exist, because we all understand how shitty the capitalist state is and capitalism is for people and society in general.
It invites all the cops to the table.
It invites all the cops to the table. There I'm referencing the fact that you're giving a monopoly of violence to the state if you were to take everybody's guns rights away. We need to be able to have guns because we need to be able to do our own autonomous, grassroots, community-based self-defense whenever violence does raise its ugly head. We don't need to be reliant on the state and their police to do the violence and self-defense for us, because that gives the state the power to enforce its tyranny and its hierarchies of oppression and race.
Makes you all rely on pure evil.
I'm referencing how evil the underlying intentions of the police are as the armed enforcers of the patriarchal capitalist system. There's a lot of oppression and violence and racism there that they're enforcing because, like I said, they need that to operate.
To settle disputes and to tell the truth, they don't do that, there is no proof.
So that's just a reference to the fact that policing and the criminal justice system don't actually prevent crime or violence in society. There's no proof and there's evidence to the contrary, like I mentioned before.
They meddle their lives, kill many black youths.
It's a reference there to how mad murderous they are, enforcing racism. They meddle in lives, which means, the criminal justice system and the police as the entry points to the criminal justice system really ruin a lot of lives and ruin people's careers and futures and creates situations where people need to resort on crimes of poverty. And so that's what I'm referencing to there.
Disabled natives and others too.
Disabled natives and others too. So yeah, that's other folks that the police are committing violence on.
Gun control is liberal. Leftists look like shills who react from the visceral. Advocate for state control.
I think that folks, whenever they see these mass murders, they react from the visceral, meaning that they feel disgusted, and so their first reaction is we need gun control. But if you examine that a little more, like I'm doing in this song, you see that that's really the wrong move, even though it feels right at the moment, because it's really hard to process these mass murders without wanting to do something, right? And I'm saying we should do something, it just shouldn't be gun control.
No. Please allow me to notion relieve you. Exhibiting signs of history amnesia. It exited your mind that self-defense needed. Without it, no social move ever succeeded.
So I'm just talking about the role of self-defense and social movements and revolutions and decolonization struggles around the globe and throughout history.
Marriage impossible without mass shooters.
So marooned slaves were slaves who escaped from slavery and then organized bands of resistance. There's a famous one in Brazil area called Quilombo dos Palmares. That's the group of maroons who actually created capoeira, and basically they organized and fought back against the Dutch and against the Spanish, and that would have been impossible without weapons of self-defense like firearms. So yeah, they were referencing the fact that Jim Crow rule was really not possible without refusing firearm sales to freed slaves, and how important that was in the state to maintain racist status quo and racial hierarchies.
Ferguson started a movement with gat users.
This is just a reference to the often glossed over fact that there was a lot of firearms self-defense against the police and against all the right-wingers that came out in Ferguson, and how important the movements in Ferguson were to spark social change throughout the country and the world for years to come. I'm wearing Black Lives Matter shirt right now, which of course was a slogan inspired by the Ferguson uprisings and made popular.
Post-Reconstruction strategical refuses. From Charlottesville to the Civil Rights Movement. Jim Crow clan and a man moves to take your Lucas.
So yeah, that's just a reference to the fact that slavery and these white supremacist control wouldn't be possible if there wasn't the state-enforced gun control measures to disarm those who would resist and those who would commit acts of self-defense against these racial tyrannies. So that's the song, Gun Control is Racist. That's the first time I did like a breakdown of my lyrics. I definitely put a lot of thought into my lyrics, and there's a lot of analysis behind what I'm saying. And so hopefully this was useful or helpful or entertaining at least. And let me know what you think about those lyrics. You can check out the song Gun Control is Racist on all platforms, right? Spotify, etc. Here on YouTube under my music playlist. You can check it out there. So yeah, thanks for joining me again on another episode of The Chopping Block. This time where we chopped up the lyrics to Gun Control is Racist and analyzed them. Alright, peace out, y'all. Have a good night.
Racist.